if I work with a right PE firm on this idea, I might just go with that same strategy of scouting the MVPs for the major metropolitan hospitals.
It's not actually, I find, the actual figuring out what's wrong with you and the waiting after that. That's the problem. It's the before. It's figuring out, oh my God, what's wrong with me?
Yeah, hey, this is LeBron James's kidney, and I have it.
It's the Viral Ideas Podcast with Dash and Runda.
Hello, everybody. Okay. This is the Viral Ideas Podcast once again. Episode 4, we have Esha Dhillon, our local Forex CEO, 3x founder extraordinaire that's working on a health tech industry startup. I once again am Runda, some guy at the Space Hotel, and Josh back at it again from a recent shoot that he just did from 10-4 Pictures. And I guess we'll just get into a brief intro with Esha for her to talk a little bit about what she does.
Yeah, sure. So thanks for having me on the show, first of all, guys. Very amazing talk show hosts, by the way. I definitely recommend them for all your podcast needs. I'm going into my 3rd year at the University of Toronto. I'm studying biology, psychology, and business, which is a little bit weird, but it makes sense once you realize what I do. I am, like Runda said, a 4-time CEO and a 3-time founder. So I've done 2 nonprofits and I'm working on my current startup. I also have another startup that I've been brought onto as a CEO, but I didn't develop it myself, hence only I'm a 3-time founder. So that's a little bit about me. In terms of my free time, I like to box. I just got back into it, so something I do in my free time. Biking, running, jogging, that kind of stuff, activities, tennis, golf. So I like to stay active.
Cool. All right. Well, did you want to start off the pod by jumping in with one of your ideas?
Yeah, sure. I can start with my current one and then work backwards if you want. It's called Global Health Corps Incorporated. I thought about it in February. Then I sat on the idea and prayed it would just come to life, which it didn't, which never happens in startups. But around March, I was like, okay, I got to get something going. So put in the papers and I'm like, okay, I want to incorporate rapid access. I'm like, oh, this is a nice title. And I just kind of Googled random titles and I got rejected. Apparently that was not a descriptive enough title for a health tech startup. So then I applied again and again. And I think on the 4th try, I came up with Global Health Corps. So just kind of popped into the air. What it does and what its purpose is to help patients. I was an emergency room volunteer for about 3 years, and I found this was during the height of pandemic as well. So I found it later, but the reason was in the pandemic. I saw patients that were struggling in the emergency room for waiting 20 plus hours just to get care. And I found that to be ridiculous, especially because you're already struggling. I saw kids in the lab just crying. I've seen elderly just really confused onto what the process is, what's going on, why exactly they're waiting over 20 hours to receive care. And it was just a mess. And the pandemic was like that. But on top of that, the system should have been able to somewhat handle a pandemic in some sort, because it is a healthcare facility. You should have some sort of support for patients to get through it. So it's not a foolproof idea, but Global Health Corps aims to limit the wait times in emergency. That was the core idea. It's an AI-directed chatbot first and foremost, so patients can put in what kind of condition they're in or what symptoms they're having. And from there, we direct them to the best place to receive care, which isn't always emergency. That's a key thing that a lot of people think. Run to emergency and it'll solve all your problems, which, first of all, is not an answer. Second of all, you probably wouldn't get care unless you're super, super emergent until much later. So those 20-hour wait times you could have pulled out if you went to a walk-in clinic, specialty care, virtual care, family care. And a lot of people don't have family physicians, which is why we try to give them that virtual option as well. Once we direct them to these places, before they get to go, they have a database of live waits of those locations. So not only do they decide where to go, but they decide how long they want to stay there for. So it helps them in their process and they can focus on why they're there, which is the healing and the getting better in the process.
Interesting. Do hospitals already, do they already know what their sort of wait time is? Is this something they already keep track of?
So as a volunteer, we had access to this kind of chart Not all patients had access to it, but we saw once they were checked in with their health card, how long they'd been waiting. That's how I know the real numbers compared to what's put online. So a lot of hospitals, they do have online stats that you can check on their website, and it will typically be 1 to 5 hours. You'll never really see much more, maybe 8 max, but that isn't the real time. They just kind of average it out so that it doesn't show it. Whereas on my side, I'm like looking at the screen at the back and it's 8 hours, and I've seen the patient who's next up waiting like 20. And I'm like, this just doesn't add up.
Right. Yeah.
For some reason, we had to go into the emergency room because it was on a weekend and our family doctor office wasn't open up and the local clinics weren't open up. And then we just had to go to that hospital because we were in the area. And the walk-in system, as you're just being assigned they had a red, yellow, and green system where it's just like almost like a traffic light on how important or like how much of an emergency that what you're going for into the emergency room is. So just to figure out that process on whether if you're assigned on a green, yellow, or red, it took us 2 hours. And it's a series of conversations that you're having with 3 levels of different individuals.
Yep. That's actually the first part once you go into emergencies as well. It's triaging. So what they do is they see who is more emergent versus the other. So if you're basically on the verge of collapsing, you're obviously going to be more of a red versus if you just have a stuffy nose, you'll be a yellow or a green even. They don't do the same color system. It varies from hospital to hospital and institute to institute. But the overall idea is to get triaged, wait, register, then wait, and then go back in and see an actual doctor or a healthcare provider. But that whole point of waiting in between these whole things causes a lot of time delays in you trying to get care. So we're not trying to focus more so on the red and like the orange people. We believe they still need to get to emergent care, and that can be emergency rooms. What we're trying to focus on is the people who are more green or yellow and can go other places and avoid waiting those long waits, so that the people who are red can stay there, wait less, and the people who are yellow and green can go to faster care and just get helped.
And it's like, so it would have helped so much more during that day because I think we were there for over 5 hours to go through that hospital process, only to find out from a doctor at the very end on the last 30 minutes of the 5 hours that, it might have been a small fracture, but it's not anything that's broken in your bone.
It's not easy. First of all, you're trying to figure out what the problem is, and then you have to wait so long to figure it out. And it's not helpful, or you're already struggling. The more complicated it is for you to find an answer, the harder it is. It's not actually, I find, the actual figuring out what's wrong with you and the waiting after that's the problem. It's the before. It's figuring out, oh my God, what's wrong with me? And the questions you'll ask yourself from I don't know to when you find out. That is the most anxiety-ridden moment for patients in hospitals, in walk-in clinics, anywhere, and even before they reach a healthcare institute. So I'm trying to help as much as I can to reduce that anxiety so that they don't have to experience that again.
I think to a level, the immediate low-hanging fruit in this area is multilingual. Just like having multilingual explanations, because I think like in Canada, we're one of the most diverse countries in the world. And sometimes we do have to take into account that, if we just provide multilingual services to explain how the process works, or like how we can expedite the process and just like get in different languages. Even like this year, we have so many newcomers or new Canadians just moving into the GTA or Vancouver. They might just not know the healthcare system of the levels of clinics or family doctors or other specialists that they can just go into instead of just going into the hospital for everything.
Yeah, completely. And especially because there are a lot new immigrants coming into such a diverse place like Canada as well, which is where I'm from. It's really nice to be able to have a community that can communicate with you and you're not just stuck on a specific language. So with our AI chatbot as well, one of our key priorities is being able to be accessible to communities, not just by language, but by any disabilities that they may have, whether that be, I once presented the idea to someone who was visually impaired, and she said, please, I want you to make sure once you build this idea, I think it's great that somebody like me or somebody who's deaf or has any other disability can happily and easily use your service. So that's something that should never be pushed to the last, I find. So we're working on that alongside and in parallel for our AI and everything that we do at the company.
Are you inspired?
Yeah, that's
Josh.
Yeah, that's gonna have a huge impact. It's gonna have a huge impact on patient experience. Just I think me personally, like I'm so driven away from going to the doctor and, especially going to the hospital for anything like that, except for, when there were situations that I've had to go, where you end up in the ER because you like hurt yourself or something. And then you realize that, it takes a really, really long time, especially if you're in any urban area, it's unbelievable. But yeah, I think that Runda is going in the right direction with get this low hanging fruit of maybe to increase adoption in hospitals, just saying, hey, this is how we can help you provide these more wide services to a more diverse population. And then, past that point, that's where then, you can sort of sneak in these things of like, oh, hey, like we can also integrate in with your, your wait time system, and we can totally, overhaul that and, take it from there. And yeah, that's an idea that I think could actually make a huge impact on so many people if there's if it has an uptake strategy.
Yeah,
that
sure.
that actually works. It makes me wonder if there's a viral angle here that could lead to the uptake.
Yeah, for sure, of course. And you were talking as well about you don't realize you need something until you're in that situation. Mine,
Yeah.
healthcare thing was just an idea, and I'm like, okay, I'll build a startup. Ooh, so cool. Until I fell down the stairs taking the laundry down, and then I fractured my ankle, and I'm like, okay, I think I need some support. So I went to my local urgent care center. So it wasn't even an emergency, it was an urgent care. And I was like, okay, it's kind of hurting. Can you get me some help? And I had to wait like 4 to 5 hours just to figure out if they could do an x-ray and then figure out from there what was wrong with me. So at that point, you're just like, what do I do? And when I was in that waiting room, I could have used something like Global Health Core, where I could just go on the web, search it up, figure out what the other options were for me instead of being like, oh, let me always have this app downloaded. That's something we stray away from. We just want you to be able to use it when you need it. And our financials will reflect that as well, on how we're trying to do the subscription model and everything like that, and so that it's easy for patients.
Yeah, I think that it gives an opportunity to also address, some areas of the medical world because they're technologically behind. Like, just the whole triaging system, having this, 3-color system that determines on how bad a patient needs care. And I mean, like, it's so obvious when you go into a hospital, and you're going through the system. It's like, oh yeah, the more that I overplay what's going on with me right now, the better chance I'll have at getting care before all these other people in line with me. But the thing is that everybody knows that. So everybody's just like overplaying each other's things, and it just seems like it's a system that's not working because they don't trust the human that they're speaking to. But if you can, but I think that if you can use, tech like this to accurately and more empathetically measure who needs care faster, and to send them in a way that maybe it would be better to take humans out of the equation and to just be like, yes, this is what the third party is deciding goes through. And I think that could help sort of answer some ethical questions that kind of pop up when you're in emergency rooms.
Completely agree. I've seen that so many times. They'll just be like, oh my God, when's my wait? And I'm like, you're still like 2 patients down the line or 10 patients down the line. They're like, you know what? I'm feeling a little bit extra unwell. And I'm like, you can't speak to me. You can speak to the triage nurse. And then all of a sudden they get there and they're just like, oh my God, I can't do anything. I'm like fevered all of a sudden from 10 seconds ago. So I get it. They need care, but it's hard. It's hard for everybody.
I got a immediate, simple kind of a content idea or like initial content push. for an app like this. When Esha mentioned that, well, what do I do? It's that entire catchphrase is such an insight. So I just imagine while pushing the app for like the AI agent on just like help you figuring out what do you do. And I would probably do like a series of these content on just like, I don't know, fell off the stairs or something. And then you figure out that you can't move your arm anymore. Well, what do I do? And then you just like speak to the app, just typed in, what do I do? And then just doing these infomercial style, just like quick pace barrage of like, here's what you can do. XYZ, are you feeling like you definitely broken your arm or something? Or is it weekend right now? Because here are all these specialists that you can immediately go to and then spinning into the direction of where you can drive to or what local clinic that you can reach out to. And just like by telling you what you can do, that's just like such an insightful catchphrase. Because even for me, when we had to drive to the hospital that day, I didn't even entirely know what can we do. So just like positioning as like during your simple medical care or healthcare, during like what consumers think is emergency, just answer, here's what you do, or have the initial content catchphrase of these like awareness video pushes or simple 15-30 second ads to just like create these content asking, what do you do?
Yep, that's a great idea. No, I didn't think of that actually. So I will definitely let my marketing team know. That's amazing.
Like, hey, should you even go to the hospital? Like, well, no, there's this walk-in clinic that's open up down the street from you that'll probably talk to you in 10 minutes. So yeah, that's a great idea. Do you guys think we're ready to move on to the next one?
Works for me.
So for this one, this is going to be a weird one. Instead of like a technical medical specialty field, this is just like something that I realized that existed. I remember just watching all those 3D medical rendering videos as a kid when I was in high school, just being mesmerized. Sometimes they just upload these on YouTube and it's 10 minutes or 20 minutes of like just red blood cells flowing around the human body or like going around organs. But then even just like seeing things being animated in 3D, got spun into a show. That's why the Magic School Bus exists. They literally made a show out of creating these kind of interesting microscopic sizes of these illustrations to just get people mesmerized. But like that's a huge audience of a content that already exists out there. So I was just like, wait, how much does it actually cost to produce these professional 3D medical animation? Turns out, from Googling this answer, it costs $5,000 to $25,000 per minute to produce these things. So if I was a larger medtech company and I actually do need these animations to be purpose-built for my case to at least advertise to the industry out there on the breakthrough biology that we're developing, I'm going to need a better way to justify for the return on investment on these 3D medical animation renderings. So I was just like, okay, what are some other ways to repurpose these things? So my thought immediately went to art. The first idea being medical rendering art exhibits. Whereas think of all these 3D assets, all these 3D animation firms already have built, and they probably have the working files of. If you're a larger med tech company, you probably do own the licenses of the work that they've produced and paid out, working files for these 3D models. And you could probably create still prints of these in large, I don't know, mitochondria or something like that. Or mixed media collaborations with local artists. Drop it like it's hot. Mitochondria.
Drop a like if you didn't know that and you just learned something new today.
If you just learned that, hashtag mitochondria.
I think that's a good idea. Like I've been to a lot of art exhibits and kind of virtual immersion experiences. I don't know if you've tried those as well. So I've seen them in different parts of the world and they're actually a lot of fun and they bring in good money. So someone who's really science oriented or even without being science oriented, it's a lot of fun to walk through it and see kind of, wow, this is inside me, this red blood cell, the mitochondria of the cell, right? It's it's cool. So the only
What if you get like Obama's organs or like Obama's like DNA or just like you get some like crazy celebrity name behind it and then be like, yeah, this is their organs,
yeah, like, I mean,
This was
that's
their
not-
organ scan. Yeah.
Yeah, like, hey, this is LeBron James's kidney, and I have it in
no, that's
3D.
not a bad idea. If you've ever been to Vegas, they have Madame Tussauds, which is the wax museum of all the celebrities. It's kind of like
Right.
the same thing, but cooler in a way. And they make good money. They make very
What's the name of this?
Madame Tussauds. It just came out.
Madam Tu-
Yeah. It's really, really cool. You can check it out.
They also
Okay.
have a small
And it's
one that's
expensive.
in a Niagara Falls tourist trap. There's also one of those.
Yeah.
Oh, I had no idea. Better check that out sometime. Maybe take a little day trip.
It's
Yeah.
cool. They're really cool. They're interesting because they're very realistic. They have the celebrities come in and see themselves side by side, and it's uncanny. Sometimes it's hard to tell. Yeah, but yeah, it's a good idea.
Well, yeah, Runda, I think that's an immediate winner because it has like infinite viral potential. I feel like the art world is just like in this like it's almost like a viral renaissance right now where I feel like I'm seeing so many artists just using like the craziest ways to like make their videos that they're posting on Instagram and TikTok. So yeah, that's a winner because yeah, it's got major viral potential, and who wouldn't want Obama's DNA on their like boardroom wall to flex?
Who wouldn't? Of course.
And then that probably make a lot of sense to repurpose these for like a mid-size biotech firm that needs to invest. That's probably like a nice, decent sized chunk of like a content investment that they have to create. But then if I'm like a larger, big pharma or like medtech firm like Pfizer, Novartis, or J&J, like what I would probably strategically do is combine it within all my community engagement activities and goodwill to the local communities, which is like to create these to the next level to engage with schools, the local high schools or middle schools, and create like a STEM art workshop out of it. So the whole thought being have one of these larger corporate companies, they could probably just donate to local schools the full year art supplies to that school. Following that, they could probably create these customized course curriculum material to help kids learn a certain kind of brushstroke technique, but they can actually help the teachers because teachers, they regularly are looking for curriculums that they can just like put in their classrooms to help kids engage or like interesting activities. You could probably get kids in an arts class to sketch a mitochondria or a red blood cell and just learn the intricacies of like, this is how you sketch curves. And then also even for just like sculpting assignments, you could easily sculpt a larger thing of like a red blood cell that's got all these intricacies, and then also paint the creations that you come forward with. And then this is such a big community play because all you really need is just like on the side, just say, oh, after all these presentations of like, oh yeah, so oh, by the way, thank you to Pfizer for providing their medical imaging. It's such a big community engagement play for these big pharma if like they were to repurpose this into a next level community engagement or marketing activity that they're just not doing.
You could use that for CSR too. Like Pfizer could put that as putting it in developing countries as well. Like you could have workshops for kids who don't know how to code, and then you teach them how to render and gain a skill as well. And you kind of double dip like that. Whereas if you do it in North America, there is, generally speaking, some more access versus other developing countries. So they could use it very well as CSR as well.
Yeah, that's huge.
By CSR, I mean corporate social responsibility. Just to put that out there for anybody wondering why I just said
Yeah.
CSR.
For the
Yeah,
artists.
yeah, thanks for-
Yeah, I needed that.
Yeah, and Runda, one other thing to jump off there is, I think we've both seen a little bit into the world of printing, and, with full color 3D printing technology that can also, translucent and clear stuff, it allows them to make a lot of these perfect medical diagrams and cross sections that you can actually hold in your hand. And that in itself, that could sort of be a way to create maybe drops where maybe you're making like 20 of these things. So maybe you've partnered with some type of celebrity name. Let's say we're doing Shock's femur, something like that, and you release only 20 of these things, and then sell them at a sort of higher ticket value. It would be following the same framework that Mischief is following, but you could just make it sort of Mischief, but for
STEM
medical
drops.
art.
Every month we're doing a STEM drop.
There's a big
Yeah.
thing. 3D imaging is rendering, and printing for valves and cardiac related things that I'm aware of as well, where you 3D print parts of, like, let's say the human body, and then they're used in surgery instead of actually doing a transplant from another person. So there's a lot of use for it.
Any ideas that might have been in your head that you're looking to get out there?
Yeah. A big thing in the medical field right now is that despite popular belief, the pay is a little bit tricky for a lot of people, making with the inflation as well, everything adding up, things are expensive. So getting the passive income sources for anyone, despite what their career is very important. Real estate's a big one that I'm looking into right now, and I find that it goes up and down, but it's important to be educated about it. I had a friend recently, actually, that had an issue with a tenant, and they just couldn't get them out. They were like, oh, I know my rights. I don't have to do this. I don't have to do that. And if we knew, apparently she'd been kicked out before, and we couldn't get that information. It's just very hard. But if we would have known that, we would have more carefully picked the tenant, right? So it's just, it's a lot of like back and forth, and it's struggling. So if you've seen on the news, they have to go and they have to stay in these houses that they're supposedly renting out or for passive income, because they're just losing money because the tenants just won't pay. So they're like, okay, I'm just going to move in and I'm going to sit in my house because I bought it. And if you don't move out, I guess I'll just move in, because it's a lot of rent money down the drain that you need to pay for the mortgage as well. So that monthly payment is getting messed with as well. So that's why another idea for that would be a tenant landlord review board. So what you could do is you can put in your experience with a certain, like, let's say both sides. So let's say that tenant had horrible experiences with their previous landlord. That's why they were kicked out. They can put that on there. And same thing, vice versa. The landlord can put a review for the tenant. Now, importantly, privacy. Right. So when you're renting something, you want to make sure that your information is private and you're not getting published all this, stuff about yourself. It works really hard if you want to try and get a job as well. If somebody goes and an employer's like, oh, they're not a good tenant. Those little things start to matter in a lot of aspects of your life. So how it would work is you would have to request it. It could be through a real estate agent, or it would only be when you're in talks to getting this person to be a tenant landlord with you. So if I say, let's say I'm looking for tenant X and they have shown interest, and I'm like, yeah, okay, maybe you can be my tenant, and I'm landlord Y. We have access to each other's history and anything that somebody's posted about us. And if you still are like, no, I don't want to share that, you can refuse. That's your right. But it kind of shows poorly that you probably have bad reviews. So that's something to consider, but it's an idea to help boost confidence for people getting into that space of real estate.
It sounds, I guess, almost like a social credit.
Yep. Exactly, because a lot of things are social right now, and the way that people do things are just very socially based, and your privacy is important. So if you want to reject giving people access to that, you can put it on like private mode or something. But it's very needed right now for anyone trying to venture.
I wonder, like, what would the already existing alternative be? And it makes me wonder, is there like a list, is there a website that exists where people are just listing off like, yeah, these are the bad tenants, like, don't work with this person?
Not that I know of. That could be something like Reddit or on public, or they're just like spamming, or they're like, oh my God, I'm super upset. Not something legitimately formed and has privacy controls or anything like that. Not that I know
Maybe
of.
like an anonymous WhatsApp group or Telegram group that's like documenting these.
And it's not even that you can go to a real estate agent and it'll be okay, because my friend actually went through a real estate agent and got that tenant, and they still happen to have a bad history that we didn't know about. So
A real estate agent can only do so much. Like they can't read the mind of the person that they're bringing you, that they're not going to end up being crazy.
I remember at the time when we found tenants, it was actually when we were showing these tenants that we just selected through either Facebook Marketplace or Kijiji. Afterwards, we were able to budget a X dollar amount, like $20, to run through like a different platform on just like credit checks and documentations on this one platform that we used at the time was called Neighborly, but then it got acquired by Single Key. So at the time it was a startup, and it was a successful exit actually. So as a landlord, after the potential prospect tenant viewed the home, I just got the qualified ones. I just selected a handful to spend $100 on, to then get them to put in all their information on this platform. It's so interesting because if you were to just like do that by hand, asking for their driver's license or like all these information that they need to fill by hand, like what some of the more scrappy landlords might do, that's like so sketchy. But then for some reason, when you do that on a platform dashboard, like a website dashboard, everyone fills in all their information. And then I have like the view on the back end as a landlord, they got relatively okay feedback. So yeah, that's been relatively successful for us. Our place is rented for over 2 years with the same family, and they've been consistently paying on time. But I think this space of squatters or people that are facing evictions is usually kind of overwhelmed within the market of this level of misinformation that gets spread out there with like social media content on just like saying, oh yeah, these TikTokers saying, oh yeah, know your rights. But then what they don't realize is like, oh yeah, eventually the landlords are going to find a way to evict them or figure out a way to legally get them escorted out the property because they haven't paid for so long. And they don't think about the long-term implications of that. I wonder if a platform that just like better helps them with educating them, whatever it's like.
You could put like your questions about like, what are my rights for this specific situation, and have a real estate based AI that gives you a response on that. And that's not just searching the web like GPT, it's focused, and the sources are ML, like machine learned from real estate agents or specific professors who are in real estate law, that kind of stuff.
Sometimes like it might just be misinformation on like what your rights technically are. Then you get the viral videos of this one guy that got viral on Twitch where his buddy had a tenant that was just like squatting the home. I'm not sure if like they were an actual tenant or they just like forged the documents, but somehow they started to squat that home. So that guy or like that landlord guy got his friend to sign with him as being a tenant in the home, and then they just mess with the squatter inside the home. And then both of them are technically tenants, so they're just like roommates legally.
It's like that. And I don't think people realize, because of how misinformed they are, that your rights are one thing, but then if you try to abuse your rights to like mess with another person as well, it's give and take, because you realize that, let's say you do squat and you're like, oh, I know my rights. That friend of mine, they're suing that person for all the missed rent. So now your credit's going to suck, and you're also going to have something on your record saying that you have been sued for thousands of dollars because you refused to pay. And then they're going to be like, were you making any money? And they're like, yeah, but like I didn't want to pay because I'm going to get evicted by the state anyway, so I'm just going to sit here. But no, the landlords will get upset because they have spent hard-earned money trying to pay that mortgage, and they're like being like taken advantage of, which isn't fair either to the party that's trying to make some extra cash.
And it's not just going to be easily dismissed small claims court kind of case. I think it is going to be way greater than $5,000.
I feel like we can sort of get into the tail end here. I think we could do two more. Runda, maybe you want to go into the essential workwear.
Okay. So the whole frame of reference came through Figs when they were really big, but now I'm sure like their stock kind of crashed a little bit. The virality kind of died down, but I'm still kind of in love with this idea of fashion apparel out there. They got all these different categories. but usually they're all pretty formulaic with like the timeless fashion, luxury, fast and contemporary, and workwear. But like with this giant trend of like brands like Carhartt being the durable workwear and functional to the middle America crowd, even though like they might not necessarily be, but then they've just like built that entire brand image around it. And then even similar to Figs, if you
I love Carhartt.
if you go to Figs, the website itself, like it's such a beautiful shot opening hero video of their entire manifesto, and kind of it just makes all these healthcare workers in hospitals look so fashion forward that you can't just help to love it. And then apparently there was a time where during COVID, they just blew up as a brand because all the new nurse grads or healthcare worker grads, they all bought Figs because that was just a brand that just stated the fact that, oh yeah, they are an essential worker and a healthcare worker at the time. And I think there's going to be a huge community of nurses or other doctors that just search for comfortable indoor shoes to literally wear in the hospital for the entire day, or sometimes even like 48 hours. And I think Crocs were loosely a big brand that arose from that on just like comfortable shoes to wear in a hospital. But right now, if I really think from a consumer's mindset, I still can't think of a large brand that's predominantly just leveraging that positioning as like essential workers wear, other than Figs being like taken primarily within scrubs where healthcare apparel, but they don't really have a shoes line. So I was just like, okay, this is such an easy gap to fill. Just make an over-engineered healthcare worker shoes. So you've seen like the over-engineered Nike Air with 3D foam posters out there with commercials like that. I'm just like, it's such an easy get. There should be either a major shoe brand or like another new startup shoe brand that just like focus on like that over-engineered kind of healthcare shoes advertising. They do that so much for athletes.
They walk a lot, like a lot. Yeah. That's why I think it comes a big deal with cushion wear, especially if you're somebody who has any type of foot condition, like you have flat feet or your toes are like kind of downwards instead of more flat. It becomes comfortable in regular shoes, let alone wearing those same shoes for like a 12-hour shift and more when you're walking home, in between, let's say you got off late, got home early, anything like that. So comfortable shoes are big, and I'm trying to find any like big companies that are like that, and I don't see any current ones. So that's a really big market as well. And the fashionable wear is huge. Wearing the same scrubs decreases morale like no tomorrow. It's the same bland color, and it's just like, oh. And even if they're colorful, they've got stuff on it, it's just whatever. But if it's fashionable, you're boosting morale, and you help decrease, even if by a little bit, the healthcare provider burnout.
Yeah, and even to a level too, if you position your brand into that market, it actually says something bigger than just like athletes. Because being the brand that supports people who save lives, that's just like a no-brainer, such a great brand position.
I think also people might be forgetting the fact that these days it's really easy to just make your own Crocs. Like if you just you can hire another 3D printing studio. You can go to them and have them give them the file, of course, and they'll be able to print you out a prototype, probably less than $500 to produce a prototype for one of these shoes that you could actually put on somebody and start taking photos with it and market the thing and see how it performs on various channels. And, if the interest is there and you want to invest in it and start actually producing the shoes and selling them, then, you have the choice to do that. And all that you've really put at risk is maybe like $500. But hey, at least you got some of your own shoes out of it in the end, if it didn't even work out. Yeah, I think that's such a low hanging fruit idea that, I mean, geez, like if I just had like a free couple weeks, I think that would be like the most fun project to ever work on. I don't know. What about you, Esha?
I think it's cool. You could do a lot with any of these ideas that have been brought up today. It's just going for it that's probably the hardest part for people. Being like, can I actually do this? And pushing yourself to make that first step, which I found is always difficult. But once you do it the first time, the second time, it becomes easier to have more confidence in not only the idea, but yourself to be able to make it happen. So having that confidence is the biggest thing you can have to make these viral ideas really.
That's a great transition because I was just going to give out a freebie go-to-market strategy that they can easily take. If anyone's seen the movie Air, which is like the story on like how
I haven't seen it.
the Nike guy kind of developed that entire company within the basketball sports footwear positioning. Yeah, I'll just like give a brief synopsis to Josh. It's basically a movie about Nike with this key player of like, I forgot his name, but a Nike exec that just worked on scouting for local basketball players or emerging sports athletes that they're able to find sponsorship money for the entire year. So Matt Damon played that character. And the story is essentially about how he was able to offer Michael Jordan to collaborate with Nike on Air Jordans. So that whole entire strategy throughout that story was basically essentially this guy scouting on these like MVPs on emerging college basketball players. But then I thought, wait, if I just like were to start this shoe brand and raise a bit of like venture capital money, or like if I work with a right PE firm on this idea, I might just like go with that same strategy of scouting the MVPs for the major metropolitan hospitals to a level. The nurses that's been around these hospitals for a while with seniority are probably the MVPs and local nurse influencers within their communities. So just strike a sponsorship to these senior nurses. Yeah, anybody. You could probably easily scout them out. It will probably be an easier process than finding athletes. But
just get them from like Toronto General or something. Get them from a hospital that sounds like a marketably intense hospital to work at. Maybe even better, when you're ready to push into the US market, go to like Chicago or something. Go to a hospital that everybody will just assume is like a freaky busy hospital based off of the name. Just go there and say like, yeah, we had their top general surgeon wear this and they loved it. Also, their nurse loved it. And so did this person. And yeah, like there you go. It doesn't really matter that they have this name that they've built up like Michael Jordan. Just, yeah, they are who they are. They're in the position that they're in. They're at the NBA level of their craft.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then like the sponsorship would be so easy. You just say, hey, we're providing you free shoes for the entire lifetime of your career, or even just like after your career. Because like Forever shoes, like you're going to go through maybe like a pair per 2 to 3, 4 years. And then it's just like,
if they're good
no
shoes.
low cost. Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. Wow. I think we should make that.
All right, don't take this idea.
I mean, I just mainly want new shoes. I just really like always getting new shoes. So custom shoes sounds fun. I don't know.
No, good idea.
Well, I love that. Okay, well, Esha, would you like to tie this episode together with one last banger idea you just give out to everyone for free?
Sure. I can talk about so I've in my first nonprofit, it was incorporated. It's called Sigma Mental Health. So for Sigma Mental Health, it was related to mental health during the pandemic. It was an anonymous blog for youth in my community specifically. So in the GTA, or even just in Canada or in Ontario in general, to be able to put in anonymous questions about what they're going through. So whether it's a family dispute, or if they feel like they want to change programs, but they don't know how to tell their family, or they're just feeling really anxious about the whole pandemic situation. They would put in that question, and then other youth from the community who had already experienced whatever they were experiencing and got past and persevered would be able to respond in a blog post and say, this is how I handled it. So not only are they responding to that individual, but a community of other people that may have been afraid to ask that question. The whole point was to create a community for them which was big during the pandemic because you're in such a tight-knit space in your home, and there's a lot of clashes, there's a lot of anxiety, a lot of changes happening that you don't really know how to navigate. And the best thing you could do is probably like turn to Reddit. And back then, GPT wasn't a big thing either. So it was fairly independent and you had to figure it out, which is not easy for a lot of people. So that's what the purpose was. But an idea to spin off from that is something called My Mental Health. And I've seen a huge shift towards the importance of mental health nowadays as well. But it would be like an AI, and you would train it to be able to talk to an individual one-on-one. So let's say it wouldn't be like GPT, it would just be its own thing that has safe, secure kind of features in place, especially for those who may be experiencing issues with self-care or self-harm, so where they need additional supports or trigger buttons where they need to say, okay, I need 911 support, or I need to contact a healthcare professional, that kind of thing. But they would be able to talk to this AI and be like, I'm experiencing this. Do you have any suggestions? I have needed to do this. I just need someone to talk to, like that kind of thing. It's not a person, which is very expensive because psychologists are like through the roof in terms of money, but it's a way.
How much per hour?
And
I
to
feel like for
corporate.
in-person, it's got to be at least 150.
Yeah. So there's a difference between psychiatrists and psychologists, but psychologists are the ones that are mostly doing the psychotherapy, talking to you, listening to you, giving you ideas, meditation, that kind of thing. Whereas psychiatrists are the people that are more referring. So they are a medical doctor and they'd be referring the medications and anything like that would kind of subdue any more extreme illnesses. Or if you have any disorders or anything from the DSM that's really like painful or anything like that bothers you, they would be giving you the medication. So there's a big price difference as well for psychiatrists versus psychologists, because one is a very heavily educated medical professional and the other one is less trained. Psychiatrists charge per hour. Yeah, so psychiatrists, which is the one, this is even for therapists, 250 to 500 per hour in Ontario, which is not okay for a lot of people to pay out of pocket that long because a lot of it isn't covered by insurance. It's also not covered usually by OHIP. So that out of pocket is pricey for your mental health. And that's something that should be covered under OHIP, but is still going through the motions of figuring out how to cover it. But yeah, so that's psychiatrists. And then psychologists, that's psychologists. So psychiatrists are, it's hard to find it. I can probably, an hour long initial evaluation is $550. Follow-up is $275. And this is a little bit much. And the allotment for follow-ups, which is the $275, is about 15-20 minutes. So this could vary, right, from place to place, from how experienced the psychiatrist or psychologist is and beyond. But it's pricey. It's very pricey.
If the
Yeah,
corporate people
sounds like
who
it.
are listening to this and they think that they're covered with a group plan, I've been covered with a group plan like that. And I've seen my allocation for those categories were only $500.
You go once and you're like, okay, you're good now. That's it.
Yeah,
Chill
yeah,
out.
just
Get a
like going for a
consultation.
consultation. That's it, done.
You'll know what's wrong with you, but you can't do anything about it.
Exactly.
So it's hard for mental health right now.
So that's the financial opportunity, I guess, per patient that you could get using something like this. I mean, provide them something that comes close to it for a lower cost, and you're going up against something that it would otherwise cost $500. That's definitely sounds like a good sign. I actually have a really quick random question though. Is this at all similar to that friend.com thing?
I've seen that. It could be similar in a way, but it would be more geared towards professional support rather than just social communication. I said it in like, oh, you need to talk to someone, but I don't mean as like me talking to Josh or Runda. It's just an actual professional trained AI. So the inputs that you put into the AI, it wouldn't just be free range, just talking. It would be trained by psychiatrists and psychologists and anyone else like that. And you can be like, I would like to speak to psychologist AI Amanda, and then you could do psychiatrist AI Josh. So you could pick and choose. And then having that support of, I don't know if I'm okay right now and I need full actual support, or I need to contact a healthcare provider, or I need 911 support because I feel like I might do something, or if I don't feel comfortable right now, then there's those trigger buttons that you can press, and the AI keeps track of the way that they're speaking, talking, and what they can do further to support this individual.
I like that. I think there's such a market need for that, especially for the type of person that maybe they're kind of open to the idea of going to therapy or just seeking some type of help for any type of need for something that's mental health related. And they're maybe considering like, oh yeah, like I would like to look into this. And then when those costs start coming up, that might be turning those people away who, they might not even be a desperately in need for help individual, but still like they could have used help, but they probably just didn't take it because they realized that they might have just not been able to afford it. So I think that having something like this, even if it's not perfect, would just be such a good thing for the world to have.
Yeah. And the big thing with startups and all these ideas is they're not supposed to be perfect. You're supposed to just push it out and get that feedback and constantly keep moving for the community needs at the time. So whatever it is, guys, just do it. Nike. Yeah.
Well,
you can quote that. You can just put that on a reel.
Let's
use that.
I think that was a great idea to tie it together there with the My Mental Health. I think that low-key might have been the best idea that we had today, even though we didn't really spend much time on it. But I just wanted to say that one is something that I think there could be one person in this space doing that, but this could literally be its own category of content that I would be shocked if you started putting out videos like that. If they didn't eventually start going viral and, building traction. I think that's a category basically waiting to happen right there. So if anyone listening to the podcast is looking for one that is like, oh, like, yeah, I have a free couple of weeks. Let me run with one of these things. Do that one. And then the audience that you build from it, you might be able to just throw another product on top of that. That's something else that we mentioned in this episode.
So interesting.
But yeah,
I go into these like startup pitches, even like sometimes in the clinical psychology sector, and so many of these clinical psychologists, they're just like working on modules that might be like proprietary, patentable as like a series of content to go through with a series of these programs. There's no real like idea that I've seen out there that's being pitched that are just like a clinical psychologist supported backed AI chatbot. Because like to a level, I'm part of like the weird people demographic where like I kind of trust platforms more than like a person instead, which is probably a significant number of the market. Because like with like the whole instead of like filling out random forms to fill your personal information to hand over to a landlord, going on a dashboard like Neighborly was like so much more easier for these people. Or like for people feel
most of my friends will call Ubers even when a taxi is cheaper.
Yeah,
it's
like
comfort.
They just didn't want to talk to the person.
Yeah. Exactly. They didn't want to make that effort to be like, oh, I gotta hail a taxi. It's on my phone. Whatever. It's worth the $50. Why not?
Yeah. It's huge. Someone should make that or don't make it. And so we can sit on it.
Yeah. We'll sit on it. And then maybe in 3 or 4 years when our schedules align, we will do it.
Yeah.
When he's not and when you're not.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you know us.
Of course, Methodist.
Okay, well, thank you to our listeners for coming on. I never actually do like plug the liking and subscribing thing, but to anyone out there who is consistently listening, you should definitely do that if you don't already, because it boosts our algorithm and that's good for us. So yeah, we would appreciate that. Thank you again for listening to the Viral Ideas podcast. Yeah, smash it. Smash it.
Yeah.
Come on. Yeah. Esha, before we go, are there any closing remarks you want to make or any call to action or, follow you somewhere?
Sure, I'll do my plugs too. But thank you for having me, first of all. I had a great time on the podcast. They're a great podcast. Definitely follow them. You can follow me on Instagram. That's probably my main thing. And LinkedIn, because I'm obsessively like constant on LinkedIn. I find like that's the best place to do anything professionally related. But my Instagram is at Dhillon_Esha. So that's my name. And then LinkedIn is linked in the bio. And all the companies that I'm with and everything like that is there too. Yeah. Reach out to me.
Smashing that following button right now.
Smash that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm tapping that follow button too.
Of course.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Well, everybody have a good rest of your days.
Thank you. Bye.
See y'all.